Good to see you all. It's our Gompa Rapso class. We're going to begin with our taking refuge in generating bodhicitta. Try to think of the meaning. Sangye chorang soki chognam la changchu baru dagni kapsu chi dagi chunen gipe sognam ki drola penche sangye drupa shok. So the two parts, the first two lines are refuge, Mahayana refuge, which distinguishes us from the Hinayana and distinguishes us from non-Buddhists. And the second two lines are the generation of conventional bodhicitta. So we're thinking, due to the merits of listening to this Dharma discourse and participating, the collections that I create, the collections of merit and wisdom, may they be the source for my achievement of Buddhahood in order to benefit sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the collections I create, through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit sentient beings, or to benefit migrating beings. In the Tibetan, this is drola. Sangye churang soki chognam la, changchu bardu dagni kapsu chi, dagi chunyen gipe sognam ki, drola penche sangye dupa sho. And then as both an offering, request to turn the wheel, and also to create the karma to be successful in listening to the Dharma, we offer mandala. By offering this ground, anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon, visualized as a Buddha realm, may all migrators enjoy such a pure realm. O holy and perfect pure Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please send down a rain of vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. Idam Guru Rana Mandalakam Niryatayami. And sit comfortably with your spine straight. I can see Khapa straining to get his back straight there. Place your attention on the respiration. As in many of the sutras, when the Buddha came back from alms, he would sit down after having washed his feet and place his attention on the breathing in front. So use that as your object of mindfulness. Once you've recognized it, inhalation, exhalation, focus on that. Keep that in mind using mindfulness to the exclusion of all the other thoughts that have been occupying you. While other thoughts or images come into your mind, just deprive them of your attention. Refocus that attention on the mindfulness of the breathing. You had a little success in that. Now bring your attention and mindfulness instead of to the breathing, bring it to the mental consciousness, first of all, which you can recognize by its contents. Like you recognize the clear sky by noticing the leaves moving through it and the birds flying, the clouds gathering, and so forth. Focus on the clarity between the thoughts, the spaciousness that allows the thoughts to persist, to be there. The clear light nature, conventional clear light nature of your mind. That has no stains of thoughts. That is the thoughts. If they leave, they don't leave a footprint or a scratch or a stain in your otherwise stainless mind. The consciousness offers no obstruction or opposition to the arisal or reabsorption of thoughts into it. That conventional clear light nature of your mind is what's called the developmental Buddha nature, which we have. All sentient beings have. The fact that we can recognize it is something special. It comes about because we have, at this moment, a life of leisure and endowment where we've heard the teachings that still exist in the world, and we're able to recognize this clear light nature of the mind and its implications, that we can develop realizations this lifetime. We can install them into this clear light nature of the mind. We can remove the faulty ways of thinking, even their imprints, even their seeds and imprints, because we have this auspicious moment of a perfect human rebirth. And as the Buddha admonished us, not to waste it on the trivial, icky-picky happiness of this lifetime, but to strive for liberation or enlightenment, And amongst the two, the Buddha advised those of sharp intellect who were his Mahayana followers not to be satisfied with his Hinayana teachings alone. They should hear them, they should practice them, but not lead to their ultimate conclusion of nirvana for oneself alone, but taking cognizance of all other living beings from our egoistic shell, extending our mind, our empathy toward others, we're exactly the same as us in wanting to be free of suffering, wanting to be happy, who have been depthlessly kind to us in previous lives and will again in the future. Not only when they've been mother, but even when they've been strangers, delivering the mail, paving the roads, paying our salaries, and even when they've been enemy, allowing us to practice patience, allowing us to, as a human, to experience the results of our past negative actions in a relatively short period of time, as opposed to eons and eons in the hell realm or other realms. They are completely defenseless now, enamored with the transitory appearances of wealth and fame and love and pleasure of the senses. Even those who go beyond that as intellectuals, as philosophers, or philosophically thinking people, they have no clue how to get out of this situation, what the actual situation of samsara is. For their benefit, we must become a Buddha. Even though there are numberless Buddhas already, we have karmic connection with many, many sentient beings that can lead, that as when we achieve Buddhahood, we can lead them more quickly due to that karmic connection than other Buddhas, even though other Buddhas appear exactly the same as us and say the exact same words as us. To the karmic connection, we can lead certain sentient beings to enlightenment more quickly. Thinking with that dual aim of achieving my own goal of Dharmakaya, wisdom Dharmakaya, and the goal of others, the ability to emanate the two form bodies, the Nirmanakaya and Sambhogakaya, to lead sentient beings. In order to achieve that state of enlightenment, I need to accumulate the two collections of merit and wisdom, which I'm still learning about, especially the collection of wisdom, as explained in Lama Tsongkhapa's Gompa Rapso. So think, sort of sequence. In order to help sentient beings, I must become Buddha. In order to become Buddha, of course, I need renunciation, bodhicitta, and the right view of emptiness, but I need to accumulate the two collections. And I can do so and understand how to do more thoroughly in the future by listening to the teaching today. I'm going to participate in the class in order to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. So relax, bring your attention back. Good to see you. Subhash, good to see you. KT is here. Amy. Louise, Snehi's here somewhere. Ida. Jennifer, hi Jennifer. Is Paul still in Arizona?
Yes.
I think he joined us for a short time last week. I wonder if he'll have
Yes,
time.
I think he's visiting his high school teacher today.
Oh, sweet.
All these years they've been in touch. So yeah.
Oh,
Yes, he sends his regrets, but yeah.
okay, nice. So, good to see you all. We have a new member, at least provisionally, Chris Hopka, whose visage is up there on the screen, chewing his, what are you chewing? Don't worry. Chris is an old friend and from Deer Park, who is going to see if this makes sense to listen to these complicated teachings. Okay, so does anyone have a question before we begin? Anything dangling from the previous lectures? We okay? Good. Richard's shaking head. No, no questions. Okay, excellent. KT, anything? You're okay. 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 So we've gotten to the point now in our text. We just finished this section. I'll just read this last thing that we talked about where I had posted the PDFs about Geshe Zopa's review of Alex Wayman's book, Calming the Mind and Discerning the Real, which was Alex Wayman's translation of the Lanrim Chemo wisdom and shamatha sections. So in Jimpa's translation, it said, there are so many issues arising from questions such as this that require more discussion. Some of these have already been addressed on numerous occasions elsewhere. So there, Lama Tsongkhapa is referring to his teachings in the Lanrim Chemo, in the Lekshe Ningbo, the essence of good explanation, the Rikbe Gyatso, which means ocean of reasoning, which was Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary, word commentary on fundamental wisdom. This is Lama Tsongkhapa's meaning commentary on fundamental wisdom. I mean, on Majjhima right? Which is itself a commentary on fundamental wisdom. But Lama Tsongkhapa also wrote a commentary to Chandrakirti's Prasana Pada, the clear words or clearly worded, called the Rikpa Gyatso. So in those and some other texts, that's what's being referred to here, that there are other issues that were raised. So those of you who want to go in more detail, the implication was that, go back and look at Lanrim Chemo on the wisdom chapters, especially Geshe Zopa's commentary to the Lanrim Chemo, and some will be addressed below as well. So that means further on in the chapters. So I will not elaborate further here. So that's where we finish. So now we're on section 10, according to the enumeration in Jimpa's translation. What page is that on in the hardbound edition? Does anyone have?
191.
191.
191. And in the FPMT booklet PDF that hopefully all of you have, that was comprised at the beginning with Jeffrey Hopkins' translation that we used earlier, and then Anne Klein's translation, part of the 6th chapter. Now we've reached page 100 in that, which corresponds to where we are in Jimpa's translation. So this was translated by Venerable Joan Nicell, old friend, Dharma friend. So there it says, establishing the meaning of the scriptures through reasoning in Venerable Joan's translation. Here it says, refuting arising. The section is called Refuting Arising from Self and Others, but the actual correspondence is the name, How the Meaning of the Scriptures is Established by Reasoning, or by Reason. Joan translated that as establishing the selflessness of establishing the meaning of the scriptures through reasoning. So now we get to the nitty-gritty of we've heard various teachings about emptiness. We've taken many courses. Now we're getting to the point where we're going to establish through reasoning, through logic, that phenomena and persons are empty of inherent existence. You've heard, heard reasons before, the 4-point analysis and so forth, but now we're going into much more detail about that. So Jinpa's text says, this has 2 parts: establishing the selflessness of phenomena through reasoning, and establishing the selflessness of persons through reasoning. So does anyone have a comment about the order there? This is so Chandrakirti's text and Lama Tsongkhapa's Gompa Rapsal here that we're reading, they first introduce the selflessness of phenomena and then the selflessness of persons. Usually we mentioned many times before that in terms of realization, your first actual taste of realizing emptiness comes through realizing the selflessness of the person. But when they're presented in the scriptures, usually it's we talk about the selflessness of phenomena first. We explain about the selflessness of phenomena. So something to think about why that is. So of those 2 parts, we're on the selflessness of establishing the selflessness of phenomena through reasoning, proving that phenomena, other than persons, are empty of inherent existence. And then so this has 4 parts, Jinpa's translation: refuting arising from the 4 extremes on both levels of truth. Jinpa's translation, arising, we usually translate different words as arising. This is actually, as Joan puts it here, refuting production from the 4 extremes with regard to both truths, or as Jinpa says, on both levels of truth. So that means on the conventional level and on the ultimate level, refuting production from the 4 extremes, or Jinpa says, refuting arising from the 4 extremes. Second, that will be coming up, rebutting objections against refuting intrinsic existence. What does that mean? Well, Venerable Joan translated it more in alliance with the way that we had translated it, Institute of Lama Tsongkhapa, dispelling arguments regarding those refutations. So what does that mean? Refutation, we've refuted, or in the first section, refuted intrinsic existence. That is, we've proved that it doesn't exist. That's kind of this sense of refutation, or here, refuting intrinsic existence. So some people are going to argue against our refutation. They're going to say, nah, you didn't do it right. There's this, that, and the other. So those are arguments regarding our refutations. And then we're going to dispel those arguments. We're going to say, well, listen, we did it right, and so forth. So whichever way works better for your mind, Jinpa translates rebutting objections against refuting intrinsic existence. That's the second outline. Then third, how arising through dependent origination prevents distortions of adhering to extreme views. Or as the FPMT translation says, when I say FPMT or Jones translation, that means the same thing. How to cease wrong conceptions that hold to an extreme by means of the production of dependent arising itself. or dependent arising production, using the reasoning of dependent arising. And then finally, the fourth outline that will be coming, the fruits of having engaged in analysis with reasoning, or identifying the result of reasoned analysis. Okay, so that's where we're going, sort of like our map, this first section talking about the establishing the selflessness of phenomena. So the first of those four outlines was refuting arising from the four extremes on both levels of truth. It's in Jinpa's text. And that has three parts itself. So you're already getting a headache, right? This outline has, as far as each of those parts, here we're only giving the parts of the first one that we're engaged in now. So this is the thing we're talking about, refuting arising or production from the four extremes on both levels of truth. This has three sections, three parts. Stating the proposition that there is no arising, no production through intrinsic nature or inherent nature. There's no inherent production. Two, the logical proofs that establish this through reasoning. And then the conclusion of having negated arising from the four extremes or production from the four extremes. The FPMT says the meaning of established by refuting production from the four extremes. Okay, so first of all, what is talked about here by the four extremes? The reasoning that we're going to be using here, that Chandrakirti used in his text, and you can find in Nagarjuna's text also. Generally, it's not called refutation of the four extremes. That's one of the other, how to say, or two of the other methods of refuting intrinsic existence. Usually this is called the Vajra slivers, or as some people call it, the diamond slivers. Even though it is referred to these four extremes, in Tibetan we say ta shi. Has anyone ever heard of the tetralemma? Oh, John has, okay. Oh, Richard has. Richard, what is the tetralemma?
Well, I think in this context, it's referring to the first verse of the fundamental wisdom, which is that says, not from self, not from others, not from both, and not spontaneously. So it's the tetralemma. It's that structure. The tetralemma is the structure of the verse.
Okay, John, do you have anything to add? What does tetralemma mean?
Well, I mean, I don't know the logic term in I guess it's in Latin, but I think extreme as a translation might be a little misleading too. It could be alternative, like a ta, but in any case, yeah, it's the four possibilities of arising. For something to have svabhava, it would have to arise either from self, from other, as Richard said.
Right. So this word tetralemma is one that the philosophers like to use, because in Greek philosophy, I'm not sure if it was Aristotle or whatever used this term. So tetralemma is not Latin, it's Greek. Tetra means four in Greek. Lemma means positions, or not so much alternatives. Yeah, so John's right. So when we talk in Tibetan, when we say tashi, it's more like the four positions, four alternative views of something. So I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. So stating the proposition that there is no arising through intrinsic nature. Jinpa translates, understanding that out of the 10 equanimities, the other perfect equanimities can be easily indicated by presenting through the perfect equanimity of the absence of arising through intrinsic nature alone. The noble Nagarjuna gave this first verse. There's a prelude to this first verse, so sometimes people count them in different ways, but generally this is the first verse of his fundamental wisdom or treatise on the middle way. Not from itself, not from other, not from both, nor from no cause. Nothing anywhere ever possesses arising at all. Or as Joan translates, not from self, not from other, not from both, not causelessly. Production of anything anywhere does not exist ever. So that's the verse that we're going to be talking about. So first of all, what are the 10 perfect equanimities, or the 10, as Joan translated, the 10 samenessnesses of phenomena? Jennifer, do you remember where that came up? No? KT?
I think it came up on the hard to conquer ground, the fifth ground, I believe. The sameness of or equanimity of signs and characteristics, and then there's like 8 more that subsets of those. I'm trying to remember.
It said that the person on the, what was it, hard to conquer, the fifth ground, entered by means of these 10 equanimities, entered that ground. So now on the 10th ground, on the sixth ground, there's a more clear understanding of these equanimities. And the first equanimity is that all phenomena, you could say all phenomena are empty of intrinsic nature. All of them are equal in being empty of intrinsic nature. And so here, let's say I'll read as Joan had translated, thinking that other sameness of phenomena are easily indicated through presenting by way of the reasoning just the sameness of non-inherent production, which is the first of these 10 samenessnesses that were explained previously. Nagarjuna states this at the beginning. So that's the idea that to elucidate all of these, this general understanding that the Bodhisattva has on the fifth and sixth ground, that phenomena are the same in all of these different ways. They're mainly talking about emptiness. He proposed this first verse. So if you're interested, Anne MacDonald has translated the Prasanapada, the first chapter of the Prasanapada in English. Remember what the Prasanapada is? Anyone? Mikhail, what's the Prasanapada?
Clear words, Chandrakirti's commentary on Nagarjuna.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that's Chandrakirti's word commentary on fundamental wisdom, going through each verse in order. Chandrakirti's meaning commentary is the Madhyamaka that we're studying indirectly through Goparaso. So Anne MacDonald has a translation of that, and she has also the Sanskrit of the verses. So if you're interested, I don't know, John, you might be interested in the Sanskrit of that. It's quite interesting. So in anyway, in Tibetan, this is Dakle Mayin. So Dak means self. Lay means from. Mayin means not from self. Shenle Min. Min is shortened for mayin, means not from other. Nile mayin, ni means two, so not from two, or in other words, both, not from both self and other. Gyu mei min. Gyu means cause, mei means is a negative, so not without cause. Ngopo kangdang kangnayang kewan namyang yomayen. A very famous verse you may hear sometime. So that's the verse we're talking about. So in talking about this, Jimba's translation of Lama Tsongkhapa says the word ever. So where does that come in? In the fourth line, in the way that Jimba's translated, ever, nothing anywhere ever produces arising at all. Or as Joan has translated, not ever is synonymous with never. Jimba says ever is synonymous with on all occasions, while the word anywhere, which is synonymous with in any place, is a locative particle, or is in the locative case, let's say. And these terms which present the basis where there is no arising. So what's that basis? On any occasion. This is mainly talking about time, right? Anywhere, we're just talking about location. So and these terms which present the basis where there is no arising indicate place, time, and philosophical standpoints. The word nothing refers to things of inner and outer, things of inner and outer. Maybe say inner and outer things. What would that mean? Inner things means things that are conjoined with your continuum, with a person's continuum, when you talk about inner phenomena. Outer phenomena are phenomena that are not conjoined with consciousness, like trees and rocks in your Subaru and so forth. The word nothing refers to inner and outer things that do not arise in any of these three terms. Thus, the meaning of the stanza that begins, not from itself, is as follows. And then he gives a sort of like a meaning of that stanza. It is never possible for anything of the outer and inner worlds, things that are conjoined with consciousness or not, to arise from themselves at any place, at any time, through any philosophical tenet or philosophical standpoint. Making sense so far? Just a statement. We haven't proved anything yet. Okay. This is how one should apply the three terms and explain. So what is he talking about, the three terms? Let me read what Joan has said here. Therefore, the meaning of the phrase from self and so forth are to be explained through affixing them as follows. It is not possible for outer and inner things to be produced from themselves in any place at any time for any tenet with respect to any philosophical school. This applies similarly to the other three assertions. E.g., or in other words, it is not possible for things to be produced from other than themselves at any in any place, at any time, at any tenet. It is not possible for phenomena to be produced from both self and other at any place, at any time, in any tenet. It is not possible for things to arise without cause at any place, at any time, at any tenet. That's what's talking about the other three. So there are these four alternatives. Mikhail, what do you think?
Which term in Nagarjuna's verse refers to any tenet?
So I think that is understood.
It's an addition from Tsongkhapa.
No, also in Chandrakirti's explanation of the verse, that's understood. We'll be coming to that. That's understood implicitly here, because, and it's like, say, for instance, who says that phenomena are produced from themselves? Does anyone know?
The Sankhya's.
The Samkhya.
Samkhya's. Yeah.
I believe the Sankhya's say that.
Yeah.
Right. So the Samkhya was philosophical school, still exists apparently in the Vedic tradition. I don't want to say Hinduism, because Hinduism is sort of misnomer. So the Samkhya school said that, say, for instance, within a seed, the future result of that seed, the sprout, already exists. And so when the sprout arises, it has arisen, when it arises from the seed, it has arisen from itself, because itself was already there. Have you heard that before? That's what self-production means. That is, it is produced from something which was already there. So the Buddhist schools don't accept that. None of the Buddhist schools accept that. The second position, production from other, most people accept, because usually the sprout is considered to be other than or different from the seed, right? Why is that? The seed is the cause. The sprout is the result. Cause and result, cause and effect, always have a temporal sequence. The cause always comes before the result, before the effect, right? If you talk about cause and effect. And they are considered to be different. All of the Buddhist schools accept that, except the lower schools, other than Prasangika, accept that they are inherently different. That the cause, let's say in this case, the sprout, say the seed, is inherently different than its result, the sprout. But at any rate, they're different. And they are, so when that's called production from other. So the production of the sprout has come from something which is other than the sprout. It's come from the seed. There are some schools who accept something a little bit murky, that it comes from both self and others. I think that will be mentioned a little bit later when we go into detail about this. And then there are some, like the Vedic school, the Charvakas, I think. Richard, are you a student of this? Had you mentioned about, you know some of these names, that don't believe in cause and effect, that things just arise without causes?
Yeah, I mean, I've studied it, but I don't remember. But I don't think I've done it on any kind of extensive detail. I've read some commentaries by people like Westerhoff and things like that. But I don't know what school, or I don't remember what school the spontaneous ones are. The Charvakas, I thought they were the materialists. Did I mistaking that?
I think that's right. The Charvakas are the materialist.
Yeah, and so would that be a school that is that believes that they're just causeless?
I don't think
that doesn't seem to
are,
make sense to me.
I don't think they say things are, or they're quoted as like having a common sense version of causation, like a real cause with a real effect. I think.
Let me just check here. When in
So
Geshe,
that would be effect from a cause, from a real
so,
cause.
so here, Geshe said, some kyangpa or travaka, even they arise from nothing at all. Gyumele kewa, things without causes and conditions. So we'll come back to that. So he said the Shravaka, not Shravaka, Chavaka. So we'll come back to that later. So there, each of these positions align with a philosophical tenet. Some people saying that things arise from self, some that they are produced from self themselves. Some say that it is produced from something other. The result arises from something which is other than that. Say that the sprout arises from a seed which is of another, which is different or other entity than the sprout. Some say that it arises from both self and other, and some say that it arises causelessly. So that's kind of the implicit thing when we talked about earlier. Someone asked, how did I think, what was it, who asked that? Mikhail, I think, right? Or someone asked which tenet, Richard, which tenet they had arisen from.
I was just going to ask, isn't the point of the tetralemma to exhaust all the positions possible? In other words, there's only 4 ways that something could arise, right? Either from self, from other, from both, or causelessly. And there's no 5th position.
Right. So the tetralemma is not limited to arising or production. Tetralemma is just talking about there are 4 possibilities. Say if you have A and B, let's say you posit A, or you posit B, or you posit A and B, or you posit neither A nor B. So there are many ways that it can be applied. Here it's being used that way. So where does it, so tetralemma is a Greek word. Do you, just out of curiosity, do you know any place where words that you've run across have the word tetra in them in English?
Tetris.
Tetrahedron, yeah.
Tetrahedron, good. What is a tetrahedron?
It's a 4-sided shape.
Right, tetrahedron. How about chemical substances? Some of you may have memory. I think Khapa probably does. Tetrahydrocannabinol. What is tetrahydrocannabinol? Steve?
That's THC, good old THC.
Thank you, John.
THC is the active ingredient that makes you in marijuana, right? Or in cannabis and so forth. So I was joking. Some of you may be familiar with that from other. I think they even sell it in little bottles now to go to sleep. And then there's some that from cannabis that have no THC, no tetrahydrocannabinol, that still helps you to go to sleep and calm your nerves and everything like that. So that's a Greek term. And lemma, does anyone know an English word with lemma in it?
Dilemma.
Dilemma. What is a
Dilemma, yeah.
What is it?
Just dilemma. But I think the tetralemma is a word made up by philosophers. It's not in the French dictionary, and I don't think in the English dictionary regular.
Which what
it comes from dilemma, and it has been transposed to four positions.
No, dilemma means two positions.
Yeah. And tetralemma has been made up by philosophers.
Party, should I stay home? That's a dilemma.
Yeah, and tetralemma is the same idea, but with 4 possibilities.
Right. Well, yeah, but just so that you know, the word lemma is something that you've there are two positions that are in conflict with one another. So generally, so when you say dilemma, generally when there's two, the prefix for two in Greek is di or dva. In Latin, it's what? Bi, bicycle, right? Right.
Sorry.
Somewhere along the line, the Indo-European languages, Latin and Greek, have a lot of correspondences. So in Latin, you say bi for two, the prefix that indicates two. In Greek, you say di. Also in Sanskrit, it's very similar. It's dva or dvai. All of these languages have certain correspondences. How the di or dva changed to b in Latin is something that the etymologists still struggle with. There's some words that very, very similar in Latin and Greek, but they changed somehow along the line. Which came first, Latin or Greek language? Anyone know?
Greek.
Greek is earlier, right? So tetralemma is something that is used in Aristotelian logic and so forth.
Hmm.
So
I think I'm not sure, Mikhail, because but I believe the tetralemma to describe Nagarjuna's logical approach, it might have been coined by David Ruegg, who is an Anglo-French Buddhist philosopher of Buddhism and translator, if you've heard of him. But I'm not sure if he was the first to use that.
right. So tetralemma is I just mentioned that because it's something that you read in books, especially written by philosophers or people who are taking some kind of stance where they want to augment their sense of the depth of their knowledge by using some kind of philosophical terms. So here, this is in Tibetan, we say ta shi. Ta means extreme or position. Shi means four. So there are four different possibilities or four different positions. Phenomena are produced from themselves, produced from something which is other than themselves, produced from both, produced without cause. So that could be given as an example of a tetralemma. Okay, Bintu, did you have something to contribute? Bintu, have you studied philosophy? Other than
I did.
Yeah. And what did you determine?
Well, I think the philosophy is like it's basically it's very cool. It's about understanding human knowledge, but people can also be attached to philosophy as well.
Okay, yeah, you're just talking about philosophy in general. I was talking about this tetralemma thing. Okay, good enough. So, we just Lama Tsongkhapa just paraphrased this first stanza, right? It is never possible for anything, any outer and inner world phenomena to arise from itself at any place, at any time, and through any philosophical standpoint. So when we're talking about production, does this also refer to permanent phenomena? Samvash, are permanent phenomena produced from self or other?
Well, I mean, if they are permanent, then that means they've always existed in that particular state.
Right.
And so how can they arise from self or other? They just had that one state.
Right. They are not products. Things that are produced from self or other or whatever are products. Product is a category of impermanent phenomena. permanent phenomena are not products. They don't have causes and conditions. So this logic of the four extremes, or the Vajra slivers, as it is called in the Tibetan philosophy, or as some people call it, the diamond slivers logic, this does not apply to permanent phenomena. It's only applying to impermanent phenomena, which are products. Okay? So right after that sort of condensation of the verse, it says, this is how one should apply the three terms and explain. Similarly, one should extend this application to the other three terms. Oh, we've done that already. It is never, for instance, it is never possible for anything to arise from other, from both self and other, and from no cause at any time, any place, and in any philosophical standpoint, any philosophical tenet. Okay, so that's where we are. So the text continues, although in the Tibetan version of the Prasanapada, the clear words, in Tibetan we say siksel, this phrase is translated as from itself nothing whatsoever. The translation suggested here reads better. So Venerable Jones translates the phrase at any place, at any time, negates, no. Therefore, the meaning of the phrase from, although the Tibetan translation of Nagarjuna's verse in the Prasanapada says anything from self, this translation is best. So this is just something Lama Tsong Khapa is pointing out. The version of the verse that we have here, that Jimpa translated, is different than the way that the verse was translated in Chandrakirti's Prasanapada when it was translated into Tibetan. The Sanskrit was the same, but the Tibetan translators translated it slightly differently. All Lama Tsong Khapa is saying is that the version that we have here reads better, more clear. Okay, how are we doing? So far, pretty simple, right? Okay. The phrase at any time, at any place, negates the possibility of interpreting along the lines akin to the situation where grapes do not grow in some areas due to place. So where do grapes grow best? In sand? In clay? Khapa?
In France.
Yeah.
Khapka's muted, so we can't hear what he's saying. In France, what, Mikhail?
Yeah, in France, in Bordeaux, in Bourgogne, for example.
Yeah, but what soil? What soil?
I don't know.
You can
I'm not
research.
one expert, sorry.
So that's what's talking about place. Okay. So it's not as though when it says nothing grows at any place, nothing is produced inherently from itself at any place. That means that even if you go to another place, they're not going to be produced from self, right? At any time, that means that, for instance, crops do not grow during some seasons due to time, due to the period. So that's why those are added in here as qualifying phrases. It's like excluding anyone trying to get out. Oh, maybe if you go to Mars, things are produced from self. Or if you go, in the past, in prehistoric times, or in the distant future, things will be produced from self. No. So it's not at any time, at any place. Thus, the inclusion of the word never is not meaningless. Mary Ellen, what do you think? Mary Ellen.
It 11. It's 11 o'clock. Maybe if you'd like to take a stretch break.
Thank you. Let me just take a short break. My blood pressure gets too high, so I take a little break in the middle to stretch my legs. So you can keep on talking. I'm going to leave it unmuted, so I'm going to take my camera off, but I'll still listen in case you have some interesting discussions while I'm taking a 5-minute break here.
You're unmuted now. Unmuted? Yeah, I just unmuted you.
Okay, so thank you. Thanks for bearing with me a short break. Yeah.
Are we off now?
We're recording. Yeah, we're back. We're back. So Jinpa's translations of Lama Tsongkhapa, so this is Lama Tsongkhapa's words through Jinpa's translation. Thus, the inclusion of the word never is not meaningless. So it has meaning. It's important. Not at any place, not at any time, not in any philosophical tenet, and so forth. Similarly, the phrase through any philosophical standpoint, that means through any tenet, or in Sanskrit, what do we say in Sanskrit, John? Standa, I think, right?
Siddhanta.
What is it?
Siddhanta.
Siddhanta. Geshe Zopa always like to use that word when we talked about tenets. Similarly, the phrase through any philosophical standpoint or any philosophical tenet, or just say tenet, rejects the thought that although intrinsic arising may not exist from the standpoint of Madhyamaka, it could exist due to the philosophical standpoint of the essentialist school, right? Or as Jones translates, although there is no production from the view of the middle way tenets, thinking there is production from the point of view of the realist tenets is refuted by saying not by any tenet. Therefore, non-production in the realist system is not indicated. This is not to state, however, that things do not arise according to the essentialist schools. So who are the essentialists or the realists? Does anyone know? Snehi, do you know who when we talk about these? If you're speaking, your microphone may not be connected. You're unmuted, but can't hear you. We can't hear you. Oh, you don't know. Okay, but you're unmuted. But you're in the future, just so you know, we can't hear you for some reason, whatever your microphone is. Maybe in the preferences on what are we using here? Zoom. You have to go to audio and make sure that the microphone connected to your computer is the one that's chosen. Anyway.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. There you go.
You were right. It was on the headphone setting. I was saying all the Buddhist schools other than Prasangika would be considered realists?
Yeah, to a certain extent. Usually the Svatantrikas and the Chittamatras would say the realists are the Hinayana schools. But from the Prasangika point of view, all of those schools, anything other than the Prasangika are kind of realistic. They believe in some kind of findable inherent existence. Okay, so continuing, when it says the commentary, as is clear from Jones' translation, that means Chandrakirti's auto-commentary. So here, Jinpa's translating, this is not a verse, because this is in the commentary. This is commentary to one of the verses. Here, the term not should be associated with arising from itself and so on, the proof of existence, and not with existence per se. For the negation of that, existence itself is affected by way of implication. Oh, talk about unclear. What does that mean? Did anyone listening to those words have an idea? Here, I'll read what Joan wrote. Here, the term not in the above verse from the Treatise on the Middle Way, when we said, what do I say? Not from self, not from other, not from both, not causelessly, production of anything, anywhere, does not exist ever. So the not, that should be associated with production from self and so on. And then she has mimicking Jimpa, as she says in her note, some amendments here from Thupten Jimpa's translation, the proof of existence, and it should not be associated with existence per se. That's just what Jimpa is saying. For the negation of that, existence itself is affected by way of implication. So Jimpa leaves no note here of what that means. Well, he has 357 says, he just quotes the place in the commentary, page 246b7. I mean, it's the back of that page. So he doesn't give any note of what here. It's kind of curious because when Geshe Zopa taught us this, he spent half an hour talking about this. Let me just mention a couple of things here. We'll spend more of the explanation in the discussion group on Monday because it's an esoteric point. So Geshe, when coming here, when it says Rangdele from the commentary, from the self-commentary, auto-commentary, Dir Mayin Shejo Adi Yopa Niki Drupche Rangle Kewa Dangdewa Yoki Dandewa Gi Yopa Dang Mi Yinte De Gakpa Dongi Drupe Chiro, this phrase. So I would suggest that John and Paul and anyone else who's sort of fluent in Tibetan memorize that, because Geshe says, what is Mayin? Sometimes this is the scholar's questions on Geshe's Damcha. What does the Damcha mean? The Geshe's Damcha, what is he referring to there?
Promise, isn't it? Like
well, yeah, what is the Geshe's Damcha?
Geshe's Damcha.
So in the debating courtyard, when you are debating anywhere, Sarah, Gandhi, whatever, one person is sitting down and they have a position to protect. That's their damcha. That's their position.
Yeah.
And so in the Geshe's exam, say if the Dalai Lama is being examined, so Geshe Zopa was one of the examiners of the Dalai Lama. So the the Dalai Lama had the damcha, held some position, and then Geshe Zopa would say, "Oh, in that case, according to you, this would follow or that would follow," and you try to chip away at their position. Sometimes, if the person's holding a wrong position, the immediate point is to cause their certainty in that wrong position to erode so that you can propose a right position. But in other cases, it's just testing out your intellectual ability and scholarly ability to debate like this. So Geshe says, sometimes this is the scholar's questions on Geshe Damcha. I heard this one time. I heard this one. Oh, dear Mayin Shejawa, what does that mean? And then the whole class, Geshe laughed, and then, of course, the whole class laughed. So you may remember me mentioning once Geshe Jumpa Gyatso praising Lama Yeshe. Lama Yeshe was didn't get a Geshe degree at Sarah. Before he got his Geshe degree, he went off and did long retreat. Maybe that's the time Lama Yeshe developed Tumo and other realizations, sort of with the blessing of Trijang Rinpoche, his guru. So, but Geshe Jampa Gyatso was making a point that Lama Yeshe, while he was at Sarah in the debating courtyard, was a formidable debater and would sometimes confound his opponents with questions. And I remember Geshe Jampa Gyatso was saying something similar to this one, but not this one, Majama Vigatara. It was a question from Abhidharma Kosha. I think we were studying with Geshe Jampa Gyatso, Abhidharma Kosha at the time. And Geshe Jampa Gyatso said that Lama Yeshe would say, on the fourth, there are three. So like, what? On the fourth, what? There are three, what? So that's the kind of thing that the scholars would sometimes use. Like, so sometimes here you would say, oh, dear Mayin Shejoa, this phrase that I said John or Paul or anyone else who knows a little bit Tibetan should memorize. So the next time you come to a Tibetan Geshe who knows his stuff, you can quote this, because it is, although it passes here in the translation without any explanation at all. I mean, what comes right next is sort of a pseudo explanation of that. It's not explaining where this comes from. The Geshes spend a lot of time analyzing this. In fact, Geshe Zopa asked Yangtze Rinpoche during this half hour or so, I may not have copied that. He asked Yangtze Rinpoche if he had ever encountered that phrase in debating courtyard, and so they debated a little bit about it. So the point of it is this: when we say this verse, not from self, not from other, not from both, not causelessly, in other words, not from neither, nothing ever arises. How did Jimpa translate here? Nothing anywhere ever possesses arising at all, or nothing anywhere ever possesses production at all. So this is talking about inherent production. So the last knot in the last line is the one that's being talked about here in Chandrakirti's commentary. Does not exist ever in Jones' translation. That final knot, there's not from self, not from other, not from both, not causelessly. It's not talking about any of those knots. The word not. So the verse, as Jimpa translates it, here the term not should be associated with arising from self and so on, the proof of existence. So we'll go into a little more detail about this on the Monday discussion, but I just wanted to mention that to you, that this is, although it looks like it's nothing here, it's a sort of a difficult problem to figure out philosophically. So let's continue reading Jimpa's translation. So after this statement from the auto commentary, Lama Tsongkhapa says, what this states is that Nagarjuna's stanza should not be read by dividing the stanzas into two parts, with the last two lines presenting the thesis and the first two lines presenting the argument. That's not to be done. But what would that be? If you look at that verse, if the last two lines were the argument or were the thesis, so if the last two lines were the thesis and the first two lines were the argument, how would that read?
wouldn't it be something like, because not from self, not from other, not from both, not nor from no cause, then nothing anywhere ever possesses arising at all. That's what he's objecting to.
I suppose. But if you're writing it as a syllogism, then the thesis is the thing you say first. Production of anything, anywhere, does not exist ever, because they are not produced from self, not produced from other, not produced from both, not produced causelessly. Make sense?
I'm afraid not.
No?
I didn't follow what you're trying to explain or distinguish from.
So good. So Jimpa's translation says what this states. So let me read Jones' translation. The meaning of this, so here she translated, here the term not in the above verse of the Treatise of the Middle Way, Fundamental Wisdom, should be associated with the production of self and so on, the proof of existence, and not with existence per se, for the negation of that existence is affected by way of implication. So I mentioned before, we'll talk more about that. That's from the auto commentary. So the meaning of that statement, Lama Tsongkhapa is explaining, is that Nagarjuna's stanza should not be read by dividing the stanza into two parts, with the last two lines presenting the thesis and the first two lines presenting the argument. I guess that's, I don't have the Tibetan right here at my fingertips. I think that means the proof. You know, usually in a syllogism, you have the subject and the predicate. The predicate provides, let's say sound is impermanent. The subject and the predicate form the thesis, right? And then the sign, sound is impermanent. That's the thesis. The subject, sound, is impermanent, predicate. That's the thesis. Because it's a product. Because it's a product is the sign. I think that's what they mean here by the argument.
Yes, that's what Venerable George, it's the thesis is damcha, and sign, like you said, is the dak.
Dak, right. So they're translating argument, right? So that's the sign. So the thesis is the subject and the predicate. So nothing, how do we say, get back to that verse. Production of anything, anywhere, that's the subject, does not exist ever, that's the predicate. So those two together form the thesis, right? Production of anything, anywhere does not exist ever, because there's no production from, it is not produced from self, not from other, not from both, not causelessly. The meaning of that Nagarjuna stanza should not be read with dividing the stanza into two parts, with the last two lines presenting the thesis and the first two lines presenting the argument or sign. Rather, it should be read as, there is no production from self ever or at any time, and extend the same predication to the other three theses as well. So it's not, although one could read that first stanza that way, and it would make sense, and even Kamalashila and others prove non-production in a way like that. That's not the intention of Nagarjuna in this case. Rather, it should be read, there is no production from self ever at any time, and extend the same predication to the other three verses as well. So there is no production from other at any time, at any place. There is no, there's no production from other ever. There is no production from both ever. There is no production causelessly ever. The point is, I'll read Jones. The point is simply this: if inherent production did exist, if inherent production did exist, one would have to accept production from any of the four possibilities as its evidence. So this is, we say tashi. Again, in Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary here, he never mentions that this is called the Vajra slivers at any point, this logic. One is left, according to the headings, to think it's called the argument of the four alternatives, or the four, what does Joan translate here? Four possibilities. Hence, Chandrakirti refers to production from the four extremes as the proof of existence. When production from the four extremes is negated, then by implication, inherent production is also negated. Hence, there is no fault of not being able to establish the absence of inherent production by formulating the argument in this way. So in other words, although this verse shouldn't be read as was proposed, that the last two lines are the thesis and the first two lines are the sign, it seemingly refuting inherent production, the existence of inherent production. That's not to be read that way. Reading it the right way, however, is just refuting individually that, just stating that that products are not produced from themselves, from other, from both, or causelessly. But in so doing, if one establishes that, one implies by the force of that, by the meaning of that, one understands that inherent production does not exist. Okay, a little bit complicated. Mikhail.
If we read the Nagarjuna's verse as Tsongkhapa is saying, then it is just a thesis. There is no sign, right?
Right. It's just an argument. So it doesn't give the reasoning. It's not as Lama Tsongkhapa is suggesting. This is how Chandrakirti explains in the Prasanapada. So it's not like some kind of idiosyncratic thing that Lama Tsongkhapa came up with. It's as how Chandrakirti is saying, you shouldn't understand this in that wrong way. This is just proposing that phenomena are not produced from self, they're not produced from other, and so forth. Suvash.
Venerable George, thank you. I want to just contrast this stanza by Nagarjuna, okay? Not from itself, not from other, not from both, nor from no cause. Nothing anywhere ever possesses arising at all. Right. Okay, I want to compare this versus, sometimes you read statements like this in the Dharma, and then you read statements elsewhere in some other text about dependent origination.
Right.
That phenomena arise dependent on causes and conditions, right? So if I take these two statements, right, and put them side by side, right, at first glance, they appear to be conflicting.
Right. Either the brain is squeezed or the brain is blowing up, like, what the heck is going on? Here, Nagarjuna is saying nothing is produced at all.
Right.
Which obviously on the face of it is not acceptable. What it's talking about when it says nothing is produced at all, that means there is no inherent production.
Okay.
So
got it.
The crucial thing is that there is mere production,
mere production.
Mere production means merely imputed production. And we will get into the nitty-gritty of that in the coming weeks. You know, when the seed, where does the seed end and the sprout begin? You know, are they inherently different things? They are not inherently different. They are just imputedly different. They're just conventionally different. When we say conventionally, meaning the correct conventional understanding. So that's a very important point that has to be mentioned here, because as you mentioned, it says phenomena arise due to dependent arising. So that means that they arise independence on causes and conditions, but that is talking about mere production, not inherent production. So the complicated thing here is that in the literature, everyone other than Prasangika is talking about inherent existence, whether they call it inherent existence or not. Let's say true existence. Lower tenets who would say true existence. Chittamatra would generally talk about true existence. Svatantrika would talk about inherent existence and so forth. All of them are presupposing there's something really, truly, inherently happening there. So when you talk about production from the four extremes or these four positions, the assumption that is made, and it will be coming right up in a few sentences here, in the scriptures, when it talks about production, it's always referring to inherent production. That's the assumption. So when Nagarjuna says, you know, you people who believe in inherent existence, take this. Not from self, not from other, not from both, not causelessly. Nothing is ever produced at any time, at any place at all. And of course, their brains blow up because they say, you know, who is it? The Samkhya's would say, oh, it is produced from self. That's their proof of existence. That phenomena exist because they're produced from self. It's phrase, proof of existence. All of the other Buddhist schools would say they're produced from an inherently existent other. Then some schools say it is produced from both self and others. Or the Shravakas say is produced causelessly. That who made the shape of a pea? Who made the color of this feather? It just arises without cause. So all of those, that's what Nagarjuna is refuting here, those individual possibilities. He is not proving the existence of non-inherent production in general. He's just refuting those. Okay, so let's read a little bit further here. In Jimpa, I'll just reread what he said. He said, rather it should be read, there is no arising from self ever or any time, and extend this same predication to the other three theses as well. The point is simply this. Were there arising through intrinsic nature, one would have to accept arising in any of these four possibilities, these tashi, as evidence. Here, Chandrakirti refers to arising from the four extremes as proof of existence. And then he says, now when arising from the four extremes is negated, then by implication, arising through intrinsic nature is also negated. So there's no fault of not being able to establish the lack of intrinsic production, formulating the argument this way, because it's understood implicitly. He translates implicitly, I think. What does he say? Implication. Actually, the Tibetan term is dungi. There are different ways of talking about things that are implicit. For instance, you can make some statement, and the implication of that, or what is implicitly understood, is something else. You're not stating something else explicitly, like the fat Devadatta does not eat at night. So you're not stating explicitly that the fat Devadatta gorges during the day, but there's no, it's that the implication, it's implied by that. If he's fat and he doesn't eat at night, he must eat during the day, right? Why would he say doesn't eat at night? Because monks are not supposed to eat after midday, right? That's kind of the implication of that. So he's fat. It just means he's really gorging at his alms round if he's fat. Okay, so Lama Tsongkhapa continues. So now this is Lama Tsongkhapa's statement. I am not saying that it is incorrect to take the negation of arising from the four extremes as the logical reason or sign, or what did they call before, argument, to establish the absence of intrinsic existence, because it's done in the, what is it, Majjhamaka Aloka, the light of the middle way by Kamalashila. That's what Kamalashila actually establishes there. What I am saying is that dividing Nagarjuna stanzas into separate parts in the manner described above is not what the text itself intends. That means it's not what Nagarjuna himself intended when he wrote that verse. Okay. So here it says Kamalashila in the light of the middle way used the four extremes as a logical reason to establish the absence of intrinsic arising. But Kamalashila was Svatantrika Majjhamaka, right? How could he refute intrinsic arising? Anyone? Okay, think about it. Discussion group will talk.
Could you restate your question? I didn't follow that.
Okay, so good. Lama Tsongkhapa himself, and so I'll read Anne's this time. I am not saying that it is incorrect to take the negation of production from the four extremes as the logical reason to establish the absence of inherent production. As it is done in the light of the middle way, I am saying that dividing Nagarjuna's stanza into separate parts in the manner described above is not what the text implies. So it's saying that you shouldn't read the last two lines as the thesis. Nothing arises at all. I was saying, sorry, what was it? The last two lines are the
Last lines are the thesis, yeah.
Thesis, and the first two lines are the sign, because he says that. Well, he doesn't mention Kamalashila, but that's the author of the Light of the Middle Way. Kamalashila used that argument to establish the absence of intrinsic production in the light of the middle way. But Kamalashila was Svatantrika Majamaka, so they accept inherent existence. How could he be refuting intrinsic arising or intrinsic production there?
Ultimately, Venerable George, he
Oh.
accepts it conventionally but refutes it ultimately.
Oh, maybe that. Okay.
I'm guessing.
Good thinking, because the Svatantrikas accept intrinsic existence conventionally, but not ultimately. So the argument, so maybe we don't have to go to the discussion group to mention that. So the argument that Kamalashila used in the light of the middle way was refuting intrinsic existence ultimately, intrinsic production ultimately, because they would accept intrinsic production conventionally. Okay, good point. Okay, you following? Suvash, you look unsure. You're okay, good. Ida, are you following? Yeah? Louise, are you there? Oh, no, so go on, Ida.
He considered the mind to be existing, right? Ultimately existing. Kamalashila? Kamalashila?
On the conventional level, yeah.
Okay.
Right, but nothing exists for them, nothing exists on ultimately, right? Louise, you have a nice pattern there. Are you there? You following?
Yeah, I'm having a hard time wrapping my mind around things existing conventionally, inherently, but not ultimately. How on earth do they do that? I don't understand that.
Okay,
How can things exist conventionally,
we also shed
inherently?
We also shed tears and what's the word in the Bible? We tear off your clothes, render our clothes off, and dealing with that in the earlier section. But in brief, what it means is for Svatantrika, what appears to the senses, let's say to the eye sense, is actually there. There is inherently existent phenomena out there. But on the ultimate level, in the sphere of emptiness, there are no conventionalities appearing. So there's no intrinsic existence existing ultimately. Intrinsic existence exists, appears as it exists on the conventional level.
Okay.
Kind of the implication of that is that if you search for the person, if you search for Louise within her basis of designation, her 5 aggregates, you can find something which is actually an illustration of Louise. So you could take that nice shawl there and wrap your mind around that.
Well, won't fit, I don't think.
Okay.
All right. So when you say illustration, you mean illusion, yes? The Svatantrikas
Question about we had the big discussion about what illustration means. So generally in the lower tenets, when you talk about illustration of the person or illustration of something, that means something that you can point to and find under ultimate analysis or under analysis that you can point out as a person. So they would say, some of them would say, the person in the final analysis, the person is the mental consciousness, or that's the person. All this other stuff is just in the periphery. That's the core. Where the Prasangika says there is no, in that meaning of the word illustration, there is no illustration of the person. The mere I or the mere person, sometimes you might say that's an illustration of the person, but what that means is that's an instance of the person. Different, a little bit different than how the word illustration is being used there. We sort of, what's the thing in the Bible? What did they say? Rendered, when someone was God.
Rend your garments, rend them.
Render unto Caesar.
Rend, R-E-N-D.
Rend, yeah, that's what I was thinking. Not render unto Caesar, Diana. That's a different concept. So rend your, accosted by some kind of revelation or something, they rended their clothes. They pulled them apart. They're sort of like, so we went through all sorts of agony in trying to figure that out, Louise. So you should.
I'm sorry to open this can of worms. I'll think about it and I'll go back to old notes. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So then let's continue a little bit further. So in Jimpa's translation, things do not arise from other at any place, at any time, or because of any philosophical tenet, is how the three terms should be applied. That means, not just from self, but also from other, from both, from neither. Similarly, the following appears in the Prasanapada. So we accept conventional truth to be established by mere conditionedness. This is getting back to whoever just was at Suvash or someone was saying, but wait, my mind is, on one's hand, it says things arise by dependent arising. On the other hand, Nagarjuna is saying there's no arisal, there's no production at all. So in the Prasanapada, it says, we accept conventional truth to be established by mere conditionedness. Or as Jones says, by way of mere conditionality, not on the basis of adhering to any of the four positions. To do so entails the consequence of speaking of things as endowed with intrinsic nature. Okay, so what is this thing that Joan translated as condition? What does she say here?
Mere conditionality.
Conditionality or conditionedness. So this is the famous idam pratyatya. I'm not pronouncing it right. Kenni dipasam. So this is a phrase that comes up tangentially here, but it comes up in the sutras again. What it means is, because of something, something else arises. Mere condition. Because of the condition of ignorance, there are karmic formations, like in the 12 links, right? First link is ignorance. Second link is karmic formation. Because of karmic formations, there is consciousness. That means that karmic formation is somehow associated or imprinted upon that consciousness. So it's not talking about causality, that one thing is the cause of another. It's just saying that because of this, that exists. You apply it in many cases. Because this mug is big, that mug is small. Because of the one condition, just because of the relationship between things. What did Jones say? The establishment of conventional phenomena is inserted by way of mere conditionality, not by way of asserting the four positions, because of the consequence, she said absurd consequence, of advocating that things have inherent existence. You don't have to, usually when we say absurd consequence, usually that's hachang telwa. Here it just says by means of because of the consequence. So this statement from Prasanapada is also in the first chapter, which I mentioned to you that Anne MacDonald translated. So this is her translation of that, or the context of that. First, before this statement, there's a question. Is it the case that on the surface level, on the conventional level, it is not necessary to point out how it is, say, is it in the case of the surface level, not necessary to point out how it is established, i.e., in terms of self from self? She just wrote the Sanskrit svata. That's the, what is that, John? The ablative, right? From self, sva, meaning so, svata, from self. She just put the Sanskrit, so leaving you to figure out what that means. Is it the case that on the surface level, the conventional level, it is not necessary to point out how it is established from self? And then the answer is the surface level's establishment, or, establishment on the conventional level, is through mere conventionality. Idam, I'll try to pronounce this correctly. Idam pratyayatamatra.
Idam pratyayatamatra.
Thank you. Recording
So,
of
I think it's pratyayata is that long at the end. That's the same as the the gen keys, the what case in the Tibetan, the geese.
Yeah, the instrumental case. Yeah.
Instrumental case after that. Yeah, it's like that.
So this is a famous phrase that comes in the Prajnaparamita and other places, not all the time, but when the Buddha was talking about how things exist, they exist by this mere conditionality, that because of one condition, another thing arises. They don't have, it's another way of saying that phenomena are merely imputed. It's different way of phrasing it, but it gets down to the same thing, that phenomena have no inherent existence. So the answer says that on the conventional level, the surface level, establishment through mere conditionality is accepted by us. That means by prasangika. Not, however, an establishment through acceptance of the fourfold position. That's what we're talking about here, these four extremes, because that would entail our admitting a doctrine which posits things are endowed with own being, with self-existence, right? And because that acceptance of any of the four positions is inappropriate. So if you have access to Anne MacDonald's translation of that, I'll ask Paul if he has, you can get a PDF of it, but the PDFs are not easily searchable. There was one PDF that was searchable, but this is Anne MacDonald's translation of Prasanapada, first chapter. She didn't translate the other chapters. I mean, sometimes there's some verses from the other chapters. Okay. So that's that phrase from the clear words. We accept conventional truth to be established by mere conditionedness or conditionality, but we don't accept that conventional truth to be established on the basis of adhering to any of the four positions. To do so entails the consequence of speaking of things as endowed with intrinsic nature, intrinsic existence. How are we doing? You have to go back and read this again. Anyway, so continuing. So arising from other, this is the point I was mentioning before when we talked about, production. In the scriptures, whenever you talk about production, the assumption is that you're talking about inherent production. So here the Lama Tsongkhapa says, so production from others, arising from other, as he puts it, is not a convention of the scriptures. It is a convention of philosophical schools. Furthermore, when arising from other is proposed, it is done on the assumption that the other is something that exists by way of intrinsic characteristics, that it is inherently other. Therefore, if one accepts such arising, one naturally subscribes to the notion that things are endowed with intrinsic nature. So in this context, Geshe Zopa quoted further on in the Gompa Rapso a famous statement. It said something to the effect that other, when we talk about production from other and so forth, is not mere other. It has to be understood as intrinsically existent other. Because following on with Sumvasha's query before, his qualm, phenomena do arise from mere other, conventionally existent other. You know, when you refute, they don't. So there's no even need to prove with analysis, analyzing the ultimate, that phenomena don't arise from themselves. You can deal with that with other absurd consequences. Phenomena don't arise from themselves. They don't arise from both self and others. They don't arise causelessly. Then there's the question of, do they arise from other? The other always is understood in that context as meaning not mere other, that intrinsically existent other. So phenomena do not arise from other, are not produced from other, means they are not produced from an inherently existent other. There's no need to add the word inherently existent other there, because that's the assumption all of the schools have. Whereas Lama Tsongkhapa said, or Chandrakirti, Nagarjuna all say that phenomena do arise from mere other. They don't arise from mere self. That's completely wrong. Or both self and others, nor causelessly. All of those are wrong. But they do arise from mere self. So in that case, when you say there is production from self in the Prasangika, you have to add the word mere there, because otherwise the assumption is that you're talking about inherently existent self. Mikhail, you look menacing there, like.
Yeah, does that mean that there is no production at all, even conventionally, from self, from both, or causeless? And so the only one that can be a question is from other.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. And then of other, if the assumption is, according to the scriptures, let's say it is done on the assumption that the other is something that exists by way of intrinsic characteristics. That's the convention of the scriptures. So when you talk about self-production or other production, it's always assuming that the production is, let's say if you're talking about other production, it's an other that is something that exists by way of intrinsic characteristics. It is inherently other. Whereas things do accept, the Prasangika does accept arising from mere other. Convention, merely imputed other. Because the seed and the sprout are not inherently other, inherently different. They look like they're different, right? To our mind, they seem like they're different conceptually. But where do you find the differentiation between one from the other? They're merely imputed other. They're mere other. So Lama Tsongkhapa continues, therefore, if one accepts such arising or production from other, one naturally subscribes to the notion that things are endowed with intrinsic nature. In this Chandrakirti tradition, it doesn't say that in the text. It says in this tradition, so that generally that's understood in this Prasangika tradition. It's not just only Chandrakirti's. But anyway, in this Prasangika tradition, however, arising from other does not exist even on the conventional level. So when we say arising from other, that means inherently existing other, right? We accept cause and effect to be distinct entities on the conventional level. They're different, they're distinct entities, but this alone does not meet the criterion of what constitutes arising from others. This is analogous to the following, as is stated in verse 623, the first line of verse 623. So if you go forward in the book, you can search for where verse 623 comes in Gompa Rabsel. So this is analogous to the following, as is stated in verse 623a. Given that each and every phenomena bears dual natures on the conventional level, nature is something that does exist, but such a nature is not accepted in terms of intrinsic arising. So what does that mean? Every phenomena bears dual natures. What are those dual natures? Ida, Tina?
I was paying attention to the reading. I'm sorry. I don't know.
Sahi, do you know? What are those two natures you're talking about? Every phenomena has two natures.
I think the conventional nature and the ultimate nature.
Yeah, every phenomena has two natures. Everything, my mug has a conventional nature and it has an ultimate nature. They are different, those natures, but they form one entity. It comes up again and again, the Heart Sutra, so many places. So they form one entity. You can't separate them. You can't separate the ultimate nature of the mug from the conventional nature in such a way that you could realize it without realizing the mug, the conventional mug. Because the ultimate nature depends on the conventional nature, right? And you can't have a conventional nature that is devoid of emptiness, of inherent existence. The two of them form one entity. So in this Prasangika tradition, Chandrakirti tradition, production from other, arising from other, does not exist even on the conventional level. That means intrinsically existent, inherently existent production. We accept cause and effect to be distinct entities on the conventional level, but this alone does not meet the criteria of what constitutes arising from other, production from other. So when it's talking about cause and effect, we're not talking about two levels of truth there. They are distinct entities, right? This is analogous to the following, as is stated in 623a. Given that each and every phenomena bears dual natures on the conventional level, nature is something that does exist, but such nature is not accepted in terms of intrinsic arising. So I thought I had the Tibetan of verse 623 here. It goes, Ngokun Yangdak Sumba Tongbai. By seeing all things as completely false, something like that. How did we oh no, we're talking about what was he talking about here? They're saying that this is analogous to the following, as is stated in 623a, given that each and every phenomena bears dual natures. So in 623, I think he's talking about A as being in his English translation there, but it's actually the second line of the Tibetan. It says ngonge ngonge ngowo nini zimbagyur. They will hold all things will hold two natures. So that will be coming later, but you've known that from other places, that all phenomena, Nagarjuna said, all phenomena have two natures. Their conventional nature and their ultimate nature. You can't have an ultimate nature of something in abstract, in vitreo, or whatever, however it's said. It always has to refer to the emptiness of something. That emptiness is a conventional phenomena. Mikhail.
Yeah, the thing is, Jimpa is saying, given that each and every phenomenon bears dual natures on the conventional level. Why on the conventional level? If this dual nature is about ultimate and conventional?
Because on the conventional level, you still talk about the ultimate nature, right? The ultimate nature itself, when cognized, there's nothing else, right? In emptiness, there's no conventionality appearing, phenomena. But on the conventional level, you can still talk about the ultimate nature. The ultimate nature itself, as every phenomena, I say, does the ultimate nature exist? Who was asking? Mikhail, right?
Yeah. Sorry, repeat the question, please.
Does ultimate nature of phenomena exist?
Conventionally, yes.
Just does it exist?
Yes.
What is that ultimate nature?
Emptiness.
Emptiness. So in emptiness, there's nothing else. But that ultimate nature, as it is an existent, Nagarjuna said all existent phenomena have two natures. It has to have also a conventional nature. So that's what's being talked about here.
I see. Yeah, great. Thank you.
So even, Hopka's getting a neck ache from that. You okay? Okay, good. Making sense, Richard? Okay. KT, how are you doing? Anna, I didn't ask you today. How are you doing? Everything okay? You following?
Yes, thank you always for either repeating things or just the details. Thank you, Venerable.
Yeah. Nadine, how are you doing? Making sense?
Yes, thank you so much.
Well, you have to go back. Doris, what do you think? Clear, or you have to transcribe the recording before you have an opinion?
I think I'm okay, but since you asked and I'm speaking, just to let people know that text by Anne MacDonald is in the protected materials on the Shantideva website.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Great.
Excellent. So that's the first chapter, her translation of the first chapter of Prasanapada. And so, although it's quite authoritative, she's really excellent translator, translating, sometimes she intersperses Sanskrit terms that you may not know, like when it says svata, like from itself and so forth. And she may translate things like on the surface level, where we would say on the conventional level and so forth. You could probably make out a lot. That's one of the only translations of that whole first chapter that exist, if there are any others. Richard, how are you doing? Any qualms, questions?
I think I understand this section.
Okay.
We'll see, but I think I do.
Okay, excellent. Diana, anything perplexing?
Me?
Yeah. Well, there's only one Diana now, I think. Diana.
I don't think I'm having any trouble with the conclusion or summary that is being accepted, nor what is refuted. But on a word by word basis, I keep feeling like I need to know where the parentheses go that the negative sign is in front of.
Right.
You know, like which chunk of these words is supposed to be negated by that word not.
Right.
And
right.
which chunks within it are or are not also negated by that word not.
Right.
I think I get where we're supposed to get to, but
okay.
on a word basis, that confuses me about the logic per se of the arguments.
Right. So this first verse, when I say the first verse, if you look at the fundamental wisdom, there's a verse that comes before that, but that's kind of like the homage. Sometimes it's counted as the first verse, but this is the actual first verse that not from self, not from other, and so forth. This is very famous, and we will talk about it again in other contexts, but it's our starting point here. It's talking about these four things, four positions that if there were inherent production, it would be produced from itself, from something which is different than itself or other than itself. It would be produced from both self and other, or it would be produced without cause. That's what the Western philosophers using this Greek terminology called the tetralemma. Actually, the tetralemma looks more like, rather than tashi, it looks more like mushi. Do you know what mushi is, John?
Well, I was actually thinking about that to ask you, what is that the same thing, or are those two different things?
Yeah, so it looks like although here it's called tashi for positions or for alternatives, that in some cases, the Sanskrit of tashi could be also, what is it in Sanskrit?
Sanskrit is koti.
That's yeah, but the four is what would it be for?
Chatush koti.
Right. So that is what the Sanskrit is, and that could be translated as tashi for positions, or it could be translated as mushi for alternatives. So the Tibetan has two different versions, but they look like they both refer to that. Say it again in Sanskrit.
Yeah, it's chatur koti, which together becomes chatush koti.
Yeah.
Chatush koti.
So that's because of the shush at the end there is because of sandhi, right?
Right, right. The R at the end of the chatur, when
which
it comes,
four,
then with the starting K sound of koti, then has to change to the visarga chatush koti.
Okay, did you get that?
The way it sounds.
we talk about, so there's similarities in English, like we say, do you say a apple?
No, right.
What do you say? An apple, right? So certain conjunction of words and letters, even in our own language, have a certain way of sounding more correct. So in Sanskrit, those rules are called the rules of sandhi, and they're actually enumerated. There are rules, like this thing that I've mentioned many times during the Lama Chopa Puja, when we say, in the text, the FPMT text, it says Namo Sangaya. And I've pointed out again and again that it should be Nama Sangaya. Paul very kindly found some text that said it could be Namo Sangaya, but the general, you find in so many places Nama Sangaya. So that's also an example of sandhi. Before the beginning, if the next word begins with an S, and the Namo then would change to Nama. So anyway, that's what that's all about. So I've gone over, I've asked if you had questions. Anyone else have a last? Amy has a question before we dedicate. What is it, Amy?
Actually, I have several questions, two of which I'll save for the discussion, but
Okay.
one is about mirror.
Right.
Mirror is, when in thinking about mirror, in terms of dependent arising, it seems that, at least my understanding, I have to get to a much more subtle level of what dependent arising is to really understand that.
Right. Dependent
And
arising.
I'm not there.
Dependent arising in one sense is this term that I couldn't pronounce, that John pronounced, that idam. Again, John, one more time.
That's the idam pratyayata matra. The matra means tsam.
Yeah. So that is phenomena merely arise in dependence on conditions. So that's kind of the meaning there. Mintu, final question.
Yeah, I have a question.
You didn't answer my question.
Oh,
I mean,
sorry,
if I
Mintu. I have to finish with Amy first before. Do you mind?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean,
So what's
that's why.
I thought you said you
Another
were,
two questions.
I thought you were finished. What's the question then?
No.
Okay. What's the
No,
question?
I think that I need a better explanation of mirror, and you just gave a little bit of it, but it seems to me that in thinking about mirror, it's hard, if one is really thinking about production and mirror, you have to go to a very, very subtle level, it seems.
Here. So let's use it in one context. When the lower schools say that phenomena, they accept that phenomena are imputed, certain phenomena are imputed. Like say, the person is an imputed phenomena, whereas the tree is a substantial phenomena. It doesn't hold water from Prasangika point of view, but they say that certain phenomena are imputed phenomena, such as the person. But they don't use the word merely imputed. They say the person is imputed upon the aggregates. That leaves open the possibility that you can find the person, even though it's imputed upon the aggregates, you can still find an example of the person there. Like, say, for instance,
I follow what you're saying, but to understand mirror in terms of dependent arising is where I'm.
But
where my mind is.
Amy, mirror is used in different contexts. It will have different meanings. So I'm just giving one example here. When we talk about phenomena being imputed, other schools would accept that, but they wouldn't accept that they're merely imputed. Merely imputed means there's nothing you can find there in that context. So when we talk about mere production, that means other schools all would say you can find production, let's say production from other. But they would not accept that production is mere production. That mere production means it is merely imputed as production. That means that you can't find anywhere in that production what you're talking about as being production. Same thing in walking. You know, when you're walking, you like my walk. There is are you walking? Is the walking with regard to what will be walked over, what is being walked over now, what was walked over in the past? It is mere walking, merely imputed as walking. There, you can't find walking or going anywhere. In the same way, you can't find production anywhere. It is merely imputed as production. So in our discussion group and in the subsequent classes, we'll talk more about that. It's coming up. Let's give Mintu his last.
So just one more point.
No,
One
no,
more point
no more,
is
no more
the
point. No
is
more
it
point.
then
No more point. Just because we're already 22 minutes over. I just wanted to give Mintu his 2 cents, because you'll come to discussion group and we can discuss it in discussion group. Mintu, what's your point?
No, I guess like, you know, trying to understand this. So like not produce inherently production for sale or order for callously, but you know, I think that currently we accept our cosmology model, the Big Bang, you know. So
Right.
basically all of the universe is crunched into a singularity. So there's nothing before the singularity, and then after that there's Big Bang. So does it mean that basically Nagarjuna just disproved the Big Bang?
Oh, well, yeah, Buddha destroyed the Big Bang because he said that this universe had predecessors, other universes. There were periods of empty when other universes disappeared, and then they arose and so forth. So it wasn't Nagarjuna, but you know, Western science still presupposes that cause and effect and phenomena are inherently existent. That's what our minds naturally gravitate to, because we generally, unless you've realized emptiness, there is the tendency of, you know, considering phenomena to be inherently existent as your a priori position. Remember when we talked about those 3 positions, there is a situation when you just talk about things just in a mere, you know, like the what is it? The example I often give, the guy who's making the horseshoes, the blacksmith. Someone asking about whose horse are you making these shoes for? He says, "Oh, that horse over there." There are situations when you consider phenomena as without grasping at them as inherent existence. But that's the standby position. You know, Western science would say, yeah, these phenomena really do exist findably, other than if you analyze in some way using what's it called, quantum mechanics, you know, on the wave level, you can't locate where the particle is. That could be sort of similar, but that's not the same as non-inherent existence. Anyway, let's leave it there. We've gone over quite a bit. Apologies to Amy. Is Amy still there? Oh yeah, she's still. We'll talk more on discussion group. So let's dedicate the merits. Also dedicating the merits that Mommy Max as may still be in the intermediate state. Thinking of her kindness to the FPMT and so forth, that she quickly find a perfect human rebirth, meet perfect Mahayana gurus, and quickly achieve enlightenment. Due to these virtues, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen already not diminish, but increase more and more. And the prayer for the quick recovery or quick recognition of the reincarnation of Lama Zopa, peerless teacher and assembly of children of the victorious ones, Shravakas, Pratika Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, together with your lineage, all objects of refuge of the infinite realms, please now bestow the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer. In holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you, Lama Zopa, wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, I make this request. You are the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, while you strove both exclusively both for the welfare of the victorious one's teachings, the Buddhist teachings, and for the welfare of mother sentient beings. While you were doing that, you suddenly departed to peace. At this, I lost hope. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truths of the oceanic blessings of the three jewels and the great waves of the bodhicitta of the bodhisattvas, may the smile of a new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for us fortunate disciples. And for all of our teachers, you who are my eyes for viewing all the infinite scriptures, supreme gateway for the fortunate ones traveling to liberation, engaging with skillful means moved by mercy, all illuminating spiritual friends, please live a long and stable life. And then think of Mommy Max possibly still in the Bardo state. She just passed away a day or two ago. That our dedication of merits on behalf of her could influence her next Bardo rebirth. That is, after 7 days in the Bardo intermediate state, she'll take a minor death there. And whatever form she might have had in the Bardo state as an animal or some other realm, it could be changed at that when she takes a new Bardo body. So dedicate our merits that she quickly find a human rebirth as a perfect human rebirth, as an auspicious moment, quickly meet perfect Mahayana spiritual guides, and finally reach her own and others' goals of her achievement of enlightenment. So thank you very much for participating. Good to see you all. Tough material, as Geshe Zopa said, this is a tough one. So we're going to talk about that tough one, and how even the Geshes debate about that. So John, you should memorize those lines to talk to maybe to Thurman. When you talked about Thurman, you say, Bob. Anyway, look forward to seeing some of you on Monday, and hopefully all of you next Saturday. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable George. It's been great.
Bye.
Thank you.